Just to keep this interactive, who was at the last Mindshare that saw my talk? Can you raise your hand? Okay, good. So that allows me to change up the game. I was asked to come back to give another talk, and so that was just a few weeks back, and so I can't promise a sequel, but I can promise a director's cut with edited additional scenes. Before I do, we just have this new video that came out on GameDesk, and I'm gonna show it just so you can get a sense of what the kids are like and what kind of this feels like. Because most of the time I give these presentations, everyone asks me, well, what are the games like? Can I go play them? And I encourage you guys to go to the site, download the games, and play them yourself. But I always like to now start with the video just to give you a sense, and it also gives you a sense of where we're going. We're serious about learning. There's something really wonderful about how these new technologies and games can engage youth. And we really want to see how that wonder can lead to serious learning. We do this by building technology and games that kids really enjoy. We've created a culture that allows teachers to work with students in ways that they never thought they could before.
The GameDesk class allows us to create the game, not just, hey, I did a game and it's cool, it's I was able to create a game that is cool.
Anytime you give students an opportunity to interact with technology, you can't help but to see learning increase.
We look at other fantastic work that's out there on the iPad, on the PC, new technologies that can be used in the classroom, and we help teachers use them effectively as tools for learning.
We've found a way to engage our students cognitively, and we've seen very encouraging results.
So I wanted to make my grasshopper jump naturally. By using the quadratic formula, I can determine the vertex and which angle it's jumping to.
What might that represent?
The number of atoms to make the molecule.
Okay.
The question is, how do we do all this? Who are we? We are a group of scientists, artists, developers, programmers, thinkers that all come together to transform these technologies into real tools for learning.
Working with GameDesk is great. It's an exciting time because we're trying to use the most modern tools to teach fundamental ideas in science.
I eventually learned some new stuff about math, like, oh, this is cool.
I never thought that I could make a video game. Thanks to MathMaker, it's very easy.
What I love about GameDesk is they make games that make learning fun.
Up until now, we've only been able to support schools locally. With this new AT&T collaboration, we're going to change that. We are going to create a new learning hub, a living learning laboratory, where research, development, and assessment of the most promising practices and products can be experienced every day from all around the local community. We're going to then capture what's happening at this hub and take it out even further to a new national portal for teachers, students, and parents that will comprise the best of the work we develop and curate from around the world. All tested and tried in the hub. We're just beginning.
Let's go. Fire it up. Turn it on. Plug it in. Push the buttons.
So I'm going to go through some different definitions of education, whether you agree with them or not. I'm going to talk a little bit about what I've talked about before, but I'm going to go deeper this time into linking game design to learning. So one definition of education is forming a mental model of the world around us. The idea that we're born, we then take in information, and in our minds we form a mental model. And we look to other models, other experiences, and these different types of what I call portals to learning allows us to effectively form these different types of mental models. And if we look at my grandfather's generation, grew up in Vinton, Louisiana, and his largest portal, he would say, would be his local school. Or perhaps you were raised by an educated family, or you were an avid reader. These were the portals. If we move through time here, we see the introduction of television, video games, early online experiences. And of course, now the world is very different. Now we live in a world full of tweeting, blogging, on mobile devices, televisions, computers, PCs, various forms of discourse, multimodal, and multiple ways of interacting and getting at information. So if you think about not only interacting with information, but we've also moved into a participatory world, a world in which we are now authoring our own experiences, where the tools and technologies are affordable, usable, intuitive enough to where kids are now remixing their own media, creating their own films. Most all phones now are at some level of video creation device. And now we're authoring our own opinions. And so now we are the authors of media. So what does that mean for education? And of course, now we've also moved to a global stage. And this is happening all around the world. But the one place that it's really not happening are schools. And so the question is, what can we do? What can we build? What can we integrate? And what's missing that would allow schools to more reflect life? And so I would not say that this reflects life. But if we were to think about it differently, we might find models that create more engagement, that are more intuitive, more natural, and more responsive to the actual types of activities that we experience every day. And so GameDesk is essentially that. We work and develop and integrate different experiences, from hard to understand sciences, to kids building their own experiences, to mobile devices, to emotional intelligence. And we do that by really bringing together people who don't often work together, aren't used to working together, and really creating this very interesting interdisciplinary mix of scientists, academia, and artists. So I want to talk a little bit about game design, because there's a lot going on right now about games and learning, and a lot of people ask, well, is that really the case? I mean, I'm not really seeing that. I'm not really seeing all these games emerge. I'm not really seeing that games are transforming learning. But I want to take this to the test. And what I did last week is I took a book that I really like, came out of Carnegie Mellon. It's a game design book. And I took several quotes and sentences out of that book, and I simply decided to take the words and switch them out. So let's look at this one. A great game designer creates a meaningful experience where a player is constantly entertained and engaged, and thus compelled to consistently overcome all cognitive challenges within the game. So let's think about this. So if you start thinking in this way, if teachers start thinking in this way, and this is the way we're getting teachers now to start thinking, then the way you approach education and teaching and the experience of learning changes. Let's look at another one. So does an intuitive interface give a feeling of control? Is my interface easy to master, or is it hard to master? Right? So in this way, we can think about different ways in which these types of designs can transform teaching. And so I've done this for all of these. And actually, I was so inspired by doing this that just yesterday, we sent this out to all of the new teachers that are launching our new school. And they are taking the entire book and replacing player with student. And we're creating a teacher's handbook that is driven by game design principles. And the ones that work and are strong and are going to seem to serve us in our first year, we're going to use, and the ones that don't, we'll keep working with. So another thing to think about is in what ways can games leverage a type of learning that is different than the traditional experience. So if you look at constant velocity, you can use the ramp traditional exercise, or you first learn the equation and then you do a couple of lab exercises. But what happens if we're moving the entire body? What happens if you're moving through the space, and as you move, the coordinates are plotted, and in that way, you develop a relationship to slope. If you move a little faster, if you're moving as fast as your opponent, in what ways can we develop a relationship with these, what we call traditional knowledge representations? And so we're doing that, and it's called embodied learning. Another thing to think about is a thing that we've been doing recently is aerodynamics. We were challenged last year to see if we could take a difficult science that was normally hard to understand, had lots of different variables. So in aerodynamics, you have lift, drag, thrust, and gravity. And normally, historically, if you look and try to find a diagram online, you'll see something like this. And what this is this is a two-dimensional knowledge representation created by someone to represent a fundamentally three-dimensional and dynamic process. Now, if a three-dimensional and dynamic process where all the forces are acting on this object and all of those forces have a relationship to each other, it's going to be kind of hard to get all of that from this picture, or even a series of paragraphs describing this picture. However, if we were to build a game, which we have, and we're going to release it in a month and a half, folks, called Arrow, where you learn every single vector as you play. And the first thing you learn is how to get a running takeoff, because albatrosses need, like a jet, to get a running takeoff in order to get lift. And then you learn gravity, and the gravity vector appears. And then you can see how gravity is always facing towards the center of the Earth as you move the bird in any given direction. And then all of a sudden, you see that the air, and this is the other thing that we do with a lot of our work, is we call make the invisible visible. So the other big character here that you don't see, and I don't have a still of, but it's super cool, and you'll see it when you play the game, is that the big character that you don't know in flight is air. That's the other big player here in this story. But you can't see it. And you can't see all these hundreds of thousands of millions of little air molecules hitting that wing and creating a bounce that is then making that wing move up, and those molecules bounce back, but also in return lifting the bird. In this game, you can see it. We make the entire invisible air world become visible, and you can see what is not often able to be seen. Excuse me. So we've been working with Bill and I on this, a lot of different folks, and we've evolved it over time. This is something we did with Sen Labs, and this was something really cool collaboration. We just did it a couple of weeks ago. We went to Washington, and we did at the USA Engineering Festival. We built an extension of Arrow that we took Dyson fans, and we surround the player, and we represent the airflow in complete relationship to the wind simulation in the game. So when you fly, where you feel the wind blowing is a big part of how you think about flying. If you're a glider, you know this is true, and birds know this is true. And so we built some wings, and the kids strap on some wings, and they are limited, just like a bird is limited. A bird is only limited by rotation of its wing, slight tilt of its body, and the movement of its tail in order to guide itself through the sky. And so we haven't worked out the tail feather part yet, but I think that's going to be pretty fun once we do. But this was a big success. If any of you guys are going to Makers Fair, I encourage you guys to catch the show. We're going to do another one there. But we're really happy about this. So again, how can games be leveraged for learning? Geoscience, planetary science, happens over millions and billions of years. In games, that's not a problem. You can condense and expand time. You can move between the macro and the microverse. In this way, games offer an opportunity to understand the big ideas, the types of things where when you were younger you go, I just don't, you don't get the eureka moment. You don't get that moment that brings you over into that next phase where you develop a passion or relationship with science. I didn't even think I liked science until I had someone open me up to it when I was in college. And so the question is, can we open these kids up early on? Can we transfer these big ideas? Same thing with this game we developed called ThermBot. One of the things we realized when we were looking at the California and state standards is that none of it actually addressed the big idea with measurement. Most kids do not realize that measurement, if you ask them what measurement is, they'll tell you the scale, or if you ask them what measurement and temperature is, they'll tell you Fahrenheit, Celsius, Kelvin. But none of them will tell you, and teachers most likely won't either, that measurement is a human creation developed by us in order to understand the universe. Now this may seem trivial to you, but I can tell you that it's not. The difference between having that fundamental understanding and not having that fundamental understanding is the difference between a kid just feeling something is being given to them and a kid feeling that they are part of the process, a part of that same discovery that the original people who developed that measurement felt when they developed Fahrenheit, when Fahrenheit developed Fahrenheit. So in this way, before they learn about Fahrenheit, Susie makes the Susie scale, Billy makes degrees Billy, And then they transfer for their robot their degrees over to Fahrenheit. And that way they can see what they've made has a relationship to what has been made before. And we think that that makes a pretty big difference in how they see it. Thinking about history, you know, again, we're taught about these different times, these different civilizations. And when we were kids, we played around with these ideas quite a bit, right? We would model what we thought these things might be. That's what play is. We would have an idea of what a domesticated life would be. We had an idea of what financial futures would look like, what financial management might look like. We had ideas of what these worlds might look like. And then what happens? We get to school. What happens to this? We don't start thinking about this again until maybe our later, more cynical years. But why aren't we cultivating a generation of people thinking about what society could be like at a very young age? Why aren't we putting this in their hands and to think about? So what we're doing with the new school is we're going to do role play micro-societies where kids become different ages and civilizations, different civilizations throughout time. And the rules will be set. Kids have to work within those rules so that they get a sense of what the rules were in each of those civilizations throughout each time period. And then they have an opportunity to change them. And then the cultivating project at the end of the year will be all of the groups will then break off and form their own societies, their own civilizations. And we're going to do that both on the practical, and if you think about Second Life, I don't know if you guys are that familiar with the historical worlds, but there is already a huge trend of people building historical worlds, modeling different historical times in different Second Life environments. And so we're going to see how we can leverage that as well. A couple of other pieces here. Skip it. Okay, great. So we also do emotional management, and I'm going to skip that one. We also do kids learning through math, and we take them to higher order learning. And I'm going to skip that video. You can check these videos online. And we do this all where they build up their knowledge. So basically, they learn each game, and they learn how to build an Angry Birds clone, and the only way they can build it is by resynthesizing their knowledge. And so we're seeing a lot of great results with this. And just to kind of finish it up here, in terms of the school that we're launching, again, this is a way to think about schools. But this is a school that I love. It's called the Minnesota School. It's where kids are basically, they gutted out their entire school. Their test scores were low. And they turned it into a Google startup environment where all the kids just work on their own projects and they're facilitated by teachers. So we're going to do some of that. We need to completely rethink what schools can look like, what schools can be, and what they can look like. And of course, we can rethink of what the day looks like as well. So instead of going through subject area content linear throughout the day, what does it look like if it's a completely choose your own adventure environment? And we're doing that as well. So instead of learning math, science, and physics, you learn roller coasters, you learn cooking with thermal energy, you learn building your own civilization. And you do that through an interest-driven model. And we'll be launching the school in September. We'll be launching the Learning Center in January, and we'll be launching this new portal that's going to allow everybody to learn from what we're doing around this time next year. And so that's where we're headed. The idea is that the Learning Center works with the school, everybody can come, and we make this available for everybody around the country to see what learning might be. In terms of getting involved, at the very low level, like us on Facebook. Blog us and tell us what you're finding, what's going on, what can we learn. If you want to become what's called a GD Playmaker, that is a way for you guys to either partner with us, do volunteer work. We're also, in the next month and a half, we're going to be putting out lots of new job opportunities and reply to that. Those who I met at the last show, we're getting to everybody, so just be a little bit more patient with us, but a lot of you guys we have talked to. And advocate and volunteer. Thank you very much.